Welcome from a rainy afternoon on Dartmoor. I've got the lurgy at the moment. I've been ill for several days, but I bounce back for a bit sometimes. And I thought, there's so much going on in the world at the moment. I need to make a couple of videos. The first one about the Iranian Revolution, the new Iranian Revolution. They're in the middle of it. It's hard to see how it's not going to tip over very soon. Thousands of people in the streets. There's people being shot, but not nearly as many as you'd expect, and that's because they're under threat from Trump. Trump probably will intervene at some point. I'm old enough to remember the original revolution in '79 when, that famous flight from Paris. Yeah, the Ayatollah Khomeini flew from Paris to Iran and landed there and began the Islamic Republic, just as Lenin took that famous journey in 1917 to Moscow and began the communist revolution, both as bad as each other. And I was particularly looking at the chart of Reza Pahlavi, who is the son of the late Shah of Iran, the guy who was overthrown in 1979. So he left Iran when he was 18 due to the revolution and has lived in the USA since. But he is acting as a figurehead for the revolution. He is appealing to people, stay in the streets. People are chanting his name. I'm sure they're not all behind him because it would be a return to a monarchical rule. But he is a figurehead. They do have a figurehead. And I found his chart really interesting at this point. He was born in 1960. He's a Scorpio, 31st of October, and his moon is right at the end of Pisces. The moon is your homeland. Pisces loses everything. You saw that in someone like Mikhail Gorbachev. He was a Pisces. He tried to reshape the USSR and just lost the whole thing. Yeah, that's what can happen to Pisces. They're the most lovable and in some ways the most hopeless sign of the zodiac. And so moon right at the end of Pisces. Neptune made an exact conjunction to his moon 3 days before the current waves of protests began. Yeah, isn't that extraordinary? Because he's the king in waiting. Yeah, Neptune is activating his return to his homeland, the long-lost homeland, Pisces, as the Redeemer, Neptune, which also rules Pisces. And so it's wonderful astrology. There's a kind of beauty in that. It's so apposite, just at the right time. Of course, you might show up there and lose everything. That's quite possible. You never quite know with these things. But something big is going on in terms of events. And now Saturn is following closely at Neptune's heels because there's a Saturn-Neptune conjunction at the moment, and will also cross his moon sometime in early February. So Neptune makes things manifest. Something big is happening for him around his homeland. He will return. Sometimes prediction is relatively easy when it comes to mundane astrology. So there's going to be a big event for him. He will either return or just lose his homeland completely. It seems more likely he will, to start with, return as the Redeemer. And it's powerful. It's Saturn and Neptune together. And if you look at the chart of Iran, for the moment the Islamic Republic began, when Khomeini landed there in 1979 and proclaimed it, it wasn't institutionally established at that point, but that's when that revolution began. The chart has angles at the beginning of the cardinal signs. It's got Aries rising, very much for beginning something. And it's the people who caused that revolution, and it's the people who don't want that revolution anymore. And so you had the moon rising in Aries for the revolution chart. The moon at 7 Aries, the rising sign at about 2 Aries. Well, of course, Saturn-Neptune is going to cross that in the next few months. So how could there not be a revolution? Yeah. And square the MC as well. It'd be doing that all of this year. And then it will cross the moon like year after next, which is like the people. And so it's going to take a year or two to establish itself. And we don't know what form that will take. Now, if we look at Pahlavi's other parts of Pahlavi's chart, he's got Saturn in Capricorn, 4 degrees above the rising sign in Capricorn. So that is a strong indicator of a responsible, traditional ruler. And if we look at the overhead point, we have the Sun and Neptune and the MC, the overhead point, all together in Scorpio, 7 and 8 degrees of Scorpio. So all that water, yeah, Sun and Moon. He's a very emotional man, very attuned to his people. Moon in Pisces. He feels where they are. He's almost, a tool of the collective with that Moon in Pisces. It's very, very open, that sign. So he's very open to what's happening in his collective, his homeland, even from 10,000 miles away or 8,000 miles, whatever it is. And so he's very emotionally attuned. He's a responsible ruler and he knows how to wield power. Sun conjunct midheaven in Scorpio, the sign that understands power. And with Neptune there's the signature of divine kingship. That's how his father saw himself. He saw himself as an instrument of the divine. Of course, that's how the mullahs see themselves, an instrument of the divine. It is their tradition. Yeah? When you see these revolutions, it can often be a case of plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. Yeah? The more things change, the more they remain the same. If you look at Russia, it went from a Tsar to communist to Putin. It's authoritarian rulers. They just give themselves different names. But that's what Russia, in a way, what it wants, what it understands. It doesn't understand democracy. Russia's only experience of democracy was in the 1990s, and they had unbearable suffering. Everything went to hell. Yeah, and Putin took over and restored order, and they're incredibly grateful to him for that. So democracy isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all. Iran has divine kingship. So that's what he will bring. He will bring that sense that he is there because Allah wants him to be. He is a man of faith. God is great. I mean, I think it is better to have faith than no faith, although that has its problems too, as we see, when it gets rigid, when it gets authoritarian. So that's something. Oh, yes. And then the other transit coming up for Pahlavi. So he's got the Saturn-Neptune on his moon, on his homeland, which is incredibly powerful. Yeah. But then following that, like next year, the year after, Pluto will be squaring his Sun MC Neptune. So that will be an enormous challenge to him to wield power, to establish power. And he may emerge triumphant, and it may not be a pretty picture. It's not going to be a pretty picture, whatever, with Pluto square Sun, or it may destroy him because it's too much for him, or because he's trying to impose too much autocracy and they want democracy. Who knows how it will go? It may not end well for him, but he's certainly involved in something very, very powerful over the next few years. And I'm with the Iranian people. I really hope it succeeds. And I really back this new way that Trump has found of facilitating change with these authoritarian regimes, because it's abominable what was happening in Venezuela. Of course, there was self-interest on the part of the US, but it's also an abominable regime where people are imprisoned all the time. They can't speak. So I support that type of change you bring there, and I support how he's done it with Iran, taken out their nuclear facilities, and now he's probably going to, and he's stopping the Iranian regime being too abominable in its opposition to what's happening. And that's a good thing as well. And you need to be able to look at the policies sometimes and not get distracted by the man and go, I support that. I might not like the man, but I like the policies. So that's something on the Iranian Revolution.